So we started this week off with the small comment about, so we say, leave HQs, rather, oh, duck moment, where they've suddenly realised, this Brexit thing isn't going to go as well as we first originally thought. And of course, this has started a slew of other Brexiteers saying, we're not Brexiting right, or you're not Brexiting right. What are you doing, Boris? And as a result, the penny in some certain sections has started to drop. And I say this with full confidence that one day on the front page of the Daily Mail, Daily Express, whatever, you name it, like the most fronting Brexiteer newspaper you can think of, there will be this slogan, or at least some variation of this slogan: this isn't the Brexit we voted for. I guarantee you that will happen in the future. And as I have said, when that day comes, I will go out, I will buy that newspaper, and I will frame it back there for all to see, for permanence of all time, just to show you how right I was. And already, we're starting to see that some Brexiteer supporters, and even some low-level Brexiteers, are starting to think, this whole Brexit thing doesn't seem to be going the way we thought it would be going. As of course now, it's pretty much a crystal clear issue now, there is going to be a no-deal Brexit. And coupled with this, coronavirus downturn, recession that we're going through, it is going to be absolutely disastrous for this country. And a lot of Brexiteers are going to blame it on the coronavirus, but they will not be able to, because Brexit always has and very will have a certain impact on certain industries. We've gone through this on this channel multiple times. So there is going to be no way of trying to hide it under the corona carpet, so to say. They cannot sweep it away. And today's article covers just exactly that. This is from the London Economic, and it's Brexiteers saying, we're not Brexiting right. Are they missing the obvious? Back in 2018, less than 2 years after the question on the UK's membership within the European Union was, quote, put to bed, I posted the following question. What happens when populism fails to deliver on its far-flung promises? But then it had become clear that many of the headline campaign pledges had been misleading. At best, and complete falsehoods at worst. As we noted at the time, there will be no taking back control at the end, no money for the NHS or British jobs for British people. Rather, we will have to face the reality that we will be worse off in all scenarios. When Britain leaves the EU, hardly the land of milk and honey that was promised in the referendum. But what is fascinating about the events that have played out is how those who drove the populist movement have reacted to it going downhill. This weekend, the Leave Alliance took an extraordinary swipe at Remainers for not allowing the government to Brexit properly. The campaign group, which argues that Britain made a fundamental mistake by joining the EU in 1973, posted a thread on Twitter saying, as we've been said start at the beginning of this week, you'll remember it, but we'll go over it again. These days, I'm heavily sceptical of Brexit and the mess that it will surely be. But we are where we are primarily because we had to fight for it for 3 times. Voting in good faith in a referendum wasn't enough. Remainers own this mess as much as the Tories. And surely they are not missing the obvious here. As Brian Cox pointed out, the notion that Boris Johnson and co are being forced into doing something stupid by the people who voted Remain is completely nonsensical. He replied to that tweet saying, I've seen a lot of this sort of thing and I don't understand the logic. Johnson could have simply decided to join the European Free Trade Area even now. An 80-seat majority. Labour would back it. I don't buy the idea that he's somehow being forced into doing something stupid by people who voted Remain. Only our pro-Brexit administration has a huge majority in Parliament and could theoretically steer this in any direction they wanted to, and indeed they have. Negotiations with the EU seem to have stalled as we head towards a hard exit from the Union. The chances of an extension made necessary due to the corona implications are also slim, given that the same very administration has written out any such move into law. This outcome is about as far away from the will of the Remainers as you could possibly get, and so blaming them on this outcome is absolutely absurd. As Martin Broadhurst said, "You lot were supposed to have a plan, but there never was one. Every point from Remainers was dismissed as Project Fear, and yet here we are. With checks on the Irish Sea and no deal looming, in name 2 scenarios, we were told this wouldn't happen." Claire Savage quite likely added, "Remainers said it was a mistake from day one. This is your shit. Time to own it." And I couldn't agree more. This mess, this whole Brexit mess, is not of our making. This is entirely on Brexiteers. Brexiteers never had a plan. They should have had a plan, but they didn't. Instead, immediately after the referendum, they rushed forward to get Article 50 triggered to start the 2-year negotiation gap. But instead of what happened, we were stuck in 2 years of trying to decide what Brexit would actually be. No one was, even though there was, again, a massive campaign to say, no, this is a bad idea, we should just remain, and I still say that is the best option for the UK, is to rejoin the European Union. You had everyone arguing, how can we do Brexit? There was no single consensus for how Brexit was meant to be done. And even the Leave campaign, they ran on a platform of every single Brexit possibility you could think of, bar a no-deal Brexit. However, cut into those 2 years, halfway through, when all this stuff is unravelling, and after May's done her big Chequers speech, Brexiteers start pushing for a no deal, just to leave straight away. And now, come 2018, now that the Tories have this big 80-seat majority in which they can pretty much do anything they want, they're still going to go for a no-deal Brexit. Why? Because it is something that they want to do. This is what the ERG want to. This was their plan from the very beginning. This gets rid of so many rights that in this country we have taken so easily for granted. You just saw this past week the farmers campaigning, pulling what was a very traditional French farming tactic you saw in the past. However, they didn't do it properly, and I really wish they would do it properly, because oh boy, they would cause some absolute chaos. And they drove their tractors to Westminster to protest. What they need to do, and I say this, follow the example of French farmers, British farmers. Do your tractor to Westminster, except don't do what you did and transport your tractor to a location so that you can do it through the streets of London. Instead, have a meeting point somewhere and get everyone to drive their tractors on the motorway to that meeting point, causing absolute chaos and havoc, which is perfectly legal, by the way, and just do your demonstration for everyone to drive their tractors from wherever they can down to Westminster. That protest will cause absolute havoc, and I guarantee you the government will sort of start to take notice. Now, the agricultural bill is an absolute disaster, and we've already discussed how much of a disaster it's going to be for this country, and indeed the farmers. And many people are blaming farmers. I see a lot of people in these comments going, oh, the farmers voted for it. But you have to look at how farmers actually voted. They were pretty much split. there was a 50-50 split. And yes, there were farmers who were saying, no, 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 let's remain in the European Union. This is good for me. This is good for my farm. This is good for my business. We can't leave. And vice versa, there were farmers out there who were pushing to leave. So don't, please, in the comments when you say, oh, farmers voted for this, they're getting what they deserve. Please be aware, not all farmers voted to leave. There were those that voted to stay. And as we saw, as pretty much the country was, it was pretty much a 50-50 split. But as we've said from the very beginning, hey, the Brexiteers are in charge. Everyone who is in Parliament at the moment in the controlling party is a hardcore Brexiteer. There's no one to stop them from anything. If, as was mentioned there, if Boris Johnson wanted to go for the Norway-style deal and join the European Free Trade Area, could absolutely do that. He's got an 80-seat majority. He doesn't even need Labour to do it. Even if Labour joined him, and they probably would join him because this mess we're going to is an absolute disaster. But this disaster of Brexit was caused by the Brexiteers. They got to own it. It is their fault, no one else's. And they can try and blame Remainers, the quote traitor MPs or whatever they want. They can blame the EU, which quite frankly, from next year will be foolish. But there will be Brexiteers blaming the EU. And of course, there'll be Brexit supporters doing exactly the same. Remember, guys, you voted for this. Time you actually owned it. Because I didn't want to leave the European Union. We were fine where we were. And the Brexit supporters, you were conned by these Brexiteers. Big time. And you were going to open this country with a massive Tory majority come next year to laws, stripping of rights you've taken for granted. And it all comes back to that one phrase. This isn't the Brexit we voted for. I've got a space on my wall just waiting for it.